Hi.
Good. Anyway. Joining the board. Okay. Thank you.
Good.
Let me
one woman who may have spoken at the end. Is there another woman on the phone?
Yes, Adrienne Henderson with OPC.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for something else. Okay, anyone else?
Vicki, did you get me? Nicole?
No, okay.
I
Great.
did another woman on the phone.
The other woman on the phone. Okay, great. And Vicki Corman, one of the women at the table.
And
I'm sorry.
just in case you didn't hear me the first time, Alana Lamarchand from Demand Side Analytics.
Yes, thank you so much. The first woman on the phone.
That's me.
Go ahead.
Good morning, I'm Ted Trevue, one of the gentlemen at the table from the DC Sustainable Energy Utility.
Sean Scully, Washington Gas.
Kirsten Williams, AOLA.
Donna Cooper, PEPCO.
Tommy Wells, welcome. You're Director of Department of Energy and Environment. Great to see everyone this morning. Great turnout.
Lance Noak, DOE.
Teresa Lawrence, DOE.
Hussein Karim, DOE.
Millie Knowlton, DESLA.
And David Swan, incoming appointee.
Welcome. Glad to have you. So I think that we have more than a forum. Yes, that's great, great. Okay, so let's get started. Does anybody have any comments on the agenda? Okay. Hearing none, how about somebody move to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, the agenda is approved. And how about the review and adoption of the minutes? I left my copy out. Maybe I have a copy. I had a couple of typos. I could ask the people, but it's not a big deal. I don't have anything of substance. Does anybody have anything on the minutes, or did you have a chance to review them previously, or need to look at them now? It's so nice and warm all the time. Yeah, assuming everyone's okay with minutes. Okay.
And with leave for just kind of technical changes, I noticed that Councilmember McDuffie's name is not spelled correctly under the legislative update section.
Thank you.
Can I ask, where is the, whenever, I think it was the CDR bill that might reduce the budget of the SEU? Is that a question of a minute?
Could you repeat the question, please? Go ahead.
Oh, the DER bill that would reduce the budget of the SEU that we went over?
It's under the legislative update section, which is, it's mentioned very briefly. Yeah. The second part.
Tricky. Yeah. Cool. Okay. Yeah, we did think, because we did talk about that, and whether or not the board would want to speak up on that point. And I know we had talked about at the appropriate time, if we heard, then we might want to. So, thank you. So, can we make a notation to that effect?
Okay. Yes.
Okay. Anyone have anything else? Or do you want to do that more? Question? Anyone on the phone have anything on the minutes? Okay. Somebody like to make a motion to approve the minutes with the amendments that Donna Cooper, Sean Kelly, and Millie Knowlton noted?
So moved.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
You all opposed? Okay, minutes approved as modified. So let's go to Dr. Wong, please, for a presentation of contract modifications by item 6.
Good morning again, folks. In your folders, we have provided copies of contract modifications number 5 and 6 that are currently being reviewed by the contracting officers. So this has not been fully executed. What I have pulled up here on the screen is the most recent modification to the contract. That's contract mod 4. And the copies of this contract are available for board members to review at any time. But if you're looking at the table, contract mod 5 is just what we call an administrative mod. Reason being, note in line 3 on the performance incentive, we initially withheld $1.4 million for performance incentives. That $1.4 million included any performance incentive from FY17 that the DCSU was eligible for, along with FY18 performance incentive. We have since completed an assessment of the DCSU's FY17 performance, which was done by NMR Group, and they will give a presentation on the findings of those results. And we have since received and processed an invoice from the DCSU and made payments for FY17 performance. Hence the need now to reduce our withholding in fiscal year 2018. So the mod that you have in front of you shows now performance incentive has been reduced down from 1.4 to 820,000. The difference, the 620,000, is now in line 1 for the DCSU to complete programming, their scope of work services. So note that line 1 has been increased from 18.9 to roughly 19.5. And just to clarify, the payment for the performance incentive that we made to the DCSU for year 1 incentives is $773,000.
And that's, what was the total potential?
The total potential was $820,000. So this modification will be sent out by the contracting officer over to VIC for their signature, and then she will countersign to fully execute this mod.
Thank you.
Yeah, Vicki, I just want to mention I'm downstairs and on the 5th floor. Somebody has a chance to come down and get me.
Okay, Lenora's gonna, are you able to go?
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, so if we can turn our attention to mod 6. Mod 6 includes an increase in the DCSU contract value over the next 3 years to account for the Solar for All dollars that we've discussed previously with the board, and also to facilitate the implementation of an emergency HVAC program by the DCSU. So mod 6 includes approximately $33 million over the next 3 years. We plan to give the DCSU about $13 million or so in FY19, and then $10 million a year in FY20 and FY21. Mod 6 also follows from Mod 4, as you may recall, where we provided a small amount of funds for the DCSU to develop an implementation plan around their rollout of a Solar for All initiative. And again, we have a presentation scheduled later this morning by David Hill from VIC to brief the board on where we are with that process and how they intend to implement their Solar for All program beginning October 1. Just a little bit on the emergency HVAC program. This is an expansion of a program that DOEE usually administers on a yearly basis. The distinction here being the income requirement has vastly increased. It's moved up to the 80% EMI to align it with a number of other program offerings that the DCSU has, but more importantly, to align it with the Mayor's Office program, the DC Office on Age's program, Safe at Home. The Safe at Home program provides benefits in terms of home safety adjustments to seniors and folks living with disability. This program here will provide for emergency replacement of their heating systems during the heating months. If there are any remaining funds available, it will be extended to do emergency cooling systems in the summer months, but based on demand and past experience, funds never usually last that long in our fiscal year because the demand always exceeds the amount of dollars we can put on the table. So we have set aside approximately $1.3 million for the DCSU to implement the emergency HVAC program. And this is a one-year program only. This program would only be implemented in FY19. The Solar for All program will hopefully go over the next 3 years, FY19, 20, and 21.
So is the modification the increase in the eligibility requirement, or is it moving the program to the SEU?
Well, the modification first is to add the funding to the contract. And then within the elements of the program, the eligibility criteria is expanded for the emergency HVAC program. If this program were being implemented by DOEE, it would have been roughly at 60% state median income. But because of some of the directives and what we're trying to coordinate with the Safe at Home program and the DCSU program, it made sense to have the eligibility be at 80% EMI.
And then how does incorporation of this new program fit into the SEU benchmarks?
It does not affect any of our existing benchmarks in terms of either low income spend or energy savings. So this is money that is separate and apart from our base budget, where we have to, with those SATF dollars, have to attain the energy savings. Low income spend, CDs, etc. This does not affect that. Although, let me make a slight correction. This money is subject to CDE spending requirements, but it does not affect our overall energy savings benchmarks.
But will you be able to utilize the efficiencies to meet those goals? So I guess when you're saying you're not necessarily utilizing the monies from it, will you be able to monitor and track those reductions in order to help if it's low income, if they meet that 60% line below threshold? Will it help you meet the goals?
No, this money would not, in and of itself, this money would not be additive to our goals. If we were to add, because the thought right now is that we will be replacing furnaces that are at code. We can only claim savings that are above code. If we were to add some of our SATF dollars to this money that's on the modification and replace furnaces above code, then we would be able to claim some of the energy savings. But the intent of the money right now is to replace furnaces at code.
So what's the benefit, playing devil's advocate, of using SEU staff to implement monies that can't be counted towards any of the benchmarks?
This, as Dr. Long was saying, this is an extension of what the agency here currently does, but it takes it another step and beyond. It increases the income eligibility, also extending this into senior citizens and citizens with disabilities. This is a very similar to a program that we ran in 2015.
When you ran that program, was that something that would go towards through benchmarks?
What we did back then was used some of our SATF dollars and combined those with the monies from, that were granted to us at that time. And then we claimed some energy savings on the projects.
Okay. So that
This is Betty Ann. Can I ask a question? I couldn't see if anyone else was talking.
Go ahead, please.
Ted, when you said this is replacing furnaces, and you said at code, what does that mean?
Furnace efficiency requirements right now for code are, I want to say 80% is the efficiency, right? 80% efficiency. So any
80%?
currently,
Did you
yes,
say 80?
yes.
Why are we using SDGF money to, let me back up. Aren't there furnaces that are more efficient? I mean, like the newest ones, the best ones would be at 94, 97%?
Madam Chair, there are furnaces that are more efficient. They are also more expensive. One of the considerations that we have in replacing furnaces that are above code is the increased efficiency, and particularly as it relates to potentially the necessity to make sure that proper ventilation systems are installed along with the more efficient furnaces. They have to vent properly, which when we did this program in 2015, and I can only use 2015 numbers, furnaces that were above code with the ventilation sometimes ran about $2,500 more than furnaces that were at code. You can get into situations where the furnaces, to properly vent them, get considerably more expensive than that if you have to do certain things within the chimney. So I don't think it would be cost effective for us to get into some of those replacements where you might be getting into a $5,000 to $10,000 situation to properly vent a furnace of that type. But about $2,500 was about the max that we were spending, again, 3 years ago. When
You're talking about these, what they call condensing boilers.
Yes, ma'am.
The high efficiency condensing gas boilers. Let me ask you, I know Tommy's there. When you say at code, I thought the district was in the process of adopting a more efficient building code. It just seems, there's millions of dollars that are available here, and it just seems to me, particularly if this is low income, almost like, I don't want to characterize it, but, you're doing the kind of the minimum but that's what is being required. I just want to express a very strong concern about putting into either the low income or anyone's home using ratepayers' money that's supposed to be doing efficiency, putting in boilers or anything that just meets the minimum efficiency, rather than spending the extra couple of $1,000 to put in the most efficient, or even much more efficient in the long run. The savings to the homeowner, the savings to the building, the savings in gas and meeting greenhouse gas reduction, etc. It seems to me it's penny wise and pound foolish, and I just want to express a very strong concern about that. Why we're spending money to put things that only meet the minimum code, and why we're not just doing that stretch. Yes, you might get a few fewer in, but it doesn't sound right for us to be doing that.
Ted, for informational purposes and aligned with what Chairman Kane just shared, when you talked about the cost variable, did you do the analysis to determine how many particular units, how many individuals you would be able to serve based on the current target of the systems that you propose versus those that are more energy efficient? Cost as well as analysis around benefits as well.
Well, if I can just add to that, Ted. Right now within our program, last year the average cost to install a furnace about 85% AFUE was around $4,000 to $4,500. If we're going up to above 90% or even at 95%, we're looking somewhere between 7,000 and 9,000 a pop to get the work done. That does not include the ancillary work that will be needed, especially as it relates to the venting, because most of these homes that we're going into, they weren't initially built or designed for these new systems. So when you take it up to the max, which I agree with Chairman Kane, we can do so, but we have to be fully cognizant that it's going to come at an extremely increased cost to be able to do so. To do the piping to vent towards the outside, to make sure that the chimney is right, to make sure that even the electrical panel boxes can handle that charge. So if we go down this path, then we possibly might be doing just about 100 homes max.
So, Lance, remind us what the source of those funds are that is being amended to Ted's contract.
The source of these funds is the SETF. The way this entire program came about, during budget formulation, we had requested a enhancement from the mayor's office to be able to operate our program in the usual basis. That, along with the demands in terms of the calls that the mayor's office was receiving, led them to take a look at our budget to realize that we have roughly about $1.3 million in the SETF fund that they can apply to this program. So the decision was made by the mayor's office and the council to add this money to the SEU budget and have the SEU implement this program on a one-year basis. Again, it's 1.3 million. If we take out the customary 20% for DCSU's admin costs, then we're roughly down to probably about 1 million, 1.1 max for implementation of this program. And you couple that with the fact that if you're spending between 7,000 and 9,000 or even 10,000 a pop, then you're doing maybe 100 to 130 households max.
And so in terms of the number of households to be served, where did the number come from to build the budget of how many houses were to be served?
The houses is based on the budget, but if you look at our demand, every year we've served approximately 200 households, and our program usually goes from October to maybe January at best, and then we're completely out of funds.
So Betty Ann, it seems like there's two things. One is that Ted's or the SCU does an analysis to see if they add their own contract funds, would it be consistent with their performance measures to go to the next level up? But in terms of how this was budgeted, it was budgeted on the number, but you're right, based on previous cost, which was at 80 to 85%. Do you see the Public Service Commission or any other area to help with the delta if it is going to be anywhere from 50 to 100% more in cost? Are there funding sources that we could pair with, and we can certainly give for next year's budget, let the mayor's folks know and advocate for the higher cost. But it's first thing is that we're leveraging hopefully SCU funds when possible, when it makes sense. But then the second is, do you see that there's a potential source from the Public Service Commission to add?
Well, I can answer that question first. I mean, there is about, I don't remember what the number is in our in the approval of the merger, the sale of Washington Gas to Alta Gas. There is about $4 million for energy efficiency programs for low income and low and moderate income multifamily housing, mostly low income. Actually, the original proposal from Washington Gas was to have that all go for gas efficiency programs, and I reminded that DOEE, the DC government on behalf of DOEE, objected to using any bit for gas, to promote gas, but in the final version, it is a mix, and it's up to the company. They'll come up with a proposal and come back to us. But I certainly know as the Public Service Commission, I would not approve any use of those funds for anything other than the most efficient kinds of furnaces. I think we're shortchanging people, no matter what the source of funds, if we're not giving them a better quality this is supposed to be sustained. So answer yes, there is some money. There is money, kind of a one-time fund for low income efficiency As I said, we objected to using it for gas appliances, but I believe that when it comes back to us, the language in the final settlement was broad enough to include gas. But secondly, I mean, it just, no matter how, I thought, Tommy, you said that the council did not legislate a certain number of people to be in this program. I just think it's wrong to be using this money to be, for low-income people, to be saying we're only going to give you minimum and code. This is supposed to be a sustainable energy utility, not a one-time, thing. And if we're going to do sustainability, if we're going to drop greenhouse gas emissions, if we're going to reduce the use of gas, if we're going to save people on their bills, then the most efficient should be put in, even though it may. Yes, it does include some. It does sometimes. I have to do it myself. It has to vent the chimney. They vent through the outside in a different way than perhaps the old gas furnaces did. But it's all part of the upgrade. And people who can afford it themselves, I can spend $13,000 to redo my furnace, etc. And I don't see why I'm paying money into the SCTF and other people are. Why my neighbor who happens to be low income shouldn't get the same value.
I think you make a very good point. I mean, we certainly want to be good stewards on both ends of the fund, but I think you make a very good point. And
yeah, that can be incorporated into the program design. We're right now in the process of developing that. So if the decision or the recommendation by the board and along with the agency is to go with the highest level of efficiency, it can be done. We'll just serve a smaller number, but we can certainly do it.
But can I ask also, I'm sorry, I was going to ask if there's a way also to try to allow the SCU to be able to use its staff time, use the piece of the administrative expenses that will go towards having a staff person on this, or part of the administrative expenses that go towards his programs, but the dedication of resources isn't also inuring to the benefit of the SCU, allowing it to be able to.
Well, other than they're adding to their admin value, they're getting that extra 20% towards their admin.
Well, I guess I mean it's not.
Madam Chair, we are going above code. We are then able to claim the energy savings
okay,
above code, so that does add to our.
Right.
To our
Okay.
Yeah,
that was the issue.
So
Yeah.
code, then the savings can count. Otherwise,
Yeah.
I said my piece.
So to Betty Ann's point, I'm just curious, what is the estimated average lifespan for one of these replacements?
Mr. Wizard.
15 to 20 years.
But they could last longer.
They can.
I know I had one of them that was less than 20.
Sure, they're not running that efficient.
Okay.
We don't.
But these newer ones, presumably, could be.
Right, and just to be clear, my issue wasn't the administrative expenses. My concern was, in a sense, taking your time in a way away from things that would be SEU functions and not allowing you to be able to put them towards achievement of SEU benchmarks. And so I think it sounds like this would be allowing that to happen.
This would add to our benchmarks under the current conversation of going, well above code.
Yeah. And I guess the question is what happens to the people who don't get anything as a result of putting more resources towards some furnaces. What happens to those folks?
Question from the audience?
I was just wondering whether or not we're planning to do an analysis in comparison to some of the lifetime costs. Because near condensing boilers have very high maintenance costs because of condensation and even with stainless steel ductwork, they have to be replaced approximately every 4 years. And if you don't replace them, you've got holes in your sauces, which could be dangerous.
Mr. Cleveren, I don't know whether you've heard some of my testimony in front of the council on this matter. I felt that some sort of maintenance program should be explored.
I mean, if you do near condensing, you're going to have to.
I would agree.
Just from the safety point.
Has SEU, I think we talked previously about your cost analysis on what investments are worth the SEU money to achieve the energy savings for the benchmark. Has SEU looked at the additional funds that would be needed to push the HVAC above code and whether that would be a worthwhile investment?
Oh, if you're asking us, did we do that when we last ran this program? Yes. And we done that for this particular iteration of the program. To date, we have not, but that is something we can facilitate.
But previously you found that those above code investments were cost effective?
Sometimes. As Dr. Longstaff, sometimes you get into a considerable amount of retrofitting and repairing in the house that's necessary to install one of these very high efficiency systems.
Is this the kind of project, that would allow for the SE to take credit for the investment that has a positive benefit in the long run? To read that?
Yes.
So there's also a benefit that way.
Yes.
Let me also to Betty Ann's question. Mark, do you know the status of the next iteration of the building code? So, Betty Ann, we're still waiting for approval from the Executive Office of the Mayor for final sign-off on the upgraded building code.
So does that mean that there's a deadline in essence on getting these things done now before the code itself gets more?
No, I wouldn't say that at all. I mean, the code has been in the mayor's office, correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, but for months now.
What I mean is, my understanding was, I'm sorry.
So, I can only hark back to, again, when we did this in FY15, the phone calls start coming in around mid-November for the furnace replacement. But there's no rush to do this before the code changes. That's not considered. If the code changes, clearly we, move along with that, make sure that we're installing above.
Still in excess.
In excess of whatever, is the code.
Yeah, this is Betty Ann again. On the issue of the chimney changes and all, isn't that the same issue that we faced with the solar roofs? It's a low-income program. I know we're going to get to solar for all, but some of the older homes or the condition of some of the homes of the people who applied for the solar for all, there needs to be roof changes so that they could, either the roof needs to be replaced before you put it on or needs to be strengthened or whatever.
Sure.
And I believe didn't DOE find some money like from DHCD and other sources to put that together. In other words, I think there are resources that could be done. We also, yes, about Washington, yes, we have in the last grade case approved an incentive program for Washington Gas for builders, primarily for new construction, to put in the most efficient appliances and to pay for the inside piping for the gas. And so again, if you ask about the Public Service Commission, we're only approving things that are going to go with the highest efficiency.
Yeah, those are certainly very good comments. They will be incorporated into the program design that is currently being developed by the DC SEU. We're trying to have this program ready to launch October 1, as soon as we start the new fiscal year, provided that we can have the contract fully approved by the council before then. Because with the amount of money we're adding to this contract, it requires council approval. So the contracting officer is putting together that package as we speak to be able to send it over to the DC Council.
So does there need to be any, change to the contract language, and or do you need anything from the board to say you would like to see it go in this direction?
Well, it's not a bad thing for the board to do. There was an issue before I got here with SEU for them using their funds to repair roofs, if I remember right. And that was a problem with the board. So if the board, like Betty Ann said, using this as an example, because we now have made it clear that the Solar for All funds can be used for repairing roofs in preparation to accept solar panels. We made that very clear. So I think that the SEU it's not determinative, but it's certainly supportive that, for example, if there's an audit that says you paid substantially more for these unit replacements than you had to. And we've seen the auditor do that, whether it be with schools or otherwise, when you go above and you add cost, that so that we can have a rebuttal or support for audits. I think an action taken by the SCU Advisory Board would be helpful in the event that Ted or us are dinged for that.
Okay, so I guess why don't we do it? Excuse me, go ahead, please.
I was going to say there's also possibility of audit the other way around, saying, gee, you put in something that was, just minimally efficient, maybe not an audit, but a press report,
Right,
like
you're
it.
right. That's why it'd be good for the board to speak to it. You're exactly right.
Minimally efficient when you had the chance for, yes, I know it's more dollars, to do something that's better for the long run. So I don't know if you want a motion or just a consent to the board, that I would move that we support the installation of the higher efficiency furnaces, including the cost. It's all part of the installation cost. It's really not so much like the roof thing, although I'm glad we got that settled too. But it's how it's vented, so there may be some, you can't just cut one furnace out and stick the other one in. It's not quite plug and play. So there may be some different, piping and other things that need to be done for the venting, because they have to vent to the outside in a different way. So that I would ask that the board go on record urging and supporting this program to focus on, or to be sure that the furnaces that are installed part of this program for low-income people be at the highest efficiency.
Is there a higher efficiency standard in the new building code that's understands that?
There will, I believe so. I don't know what it is. Penny.
But that's why I think whenever the code comes out, it will be in excess of that.
Yeah.
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 So let's say the board we're moving from Chairman Kane to have the board is going to speak to the desire to see this program leverage funds so as to ensure from the funds it's getting and from the SU funds to ensure that it's getting the higher efficiency boilers and using funds in a way that will further its achievement of low income and energy saving benchmark. That's a standalone board motion or something that's incorporated into the contract itself, contract modification. Because I think were we also saying that we wanted to do some analysis or
It should probably really be written into the contract.
agreed? Yeah, so could we do that?
Yeah, the program design would be incorporated into this contract. The way it's written right now, once we finish with the design, it then becomes another one of the attachments to this contract. So it's binding whatever we put in the program design. But we do agree and accept, it's the board's motion and recommendation. The minutes for today's meeting will reflect this point that we're discussing here, that the board is recommending the highest level of efficiency.
Okay, so I echoed the chairman's motion and added a couple of details to it. Anybody want a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor? Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Long. So we go to Solar for All.
Yes. Good morning again, folks. I want to introduce Dr. David Hill from VEIC. He works very closely with the DCSC on developing the Solar for All implementation plan. And we'd asked him to come this morning to provide an update to the board on where we are in the process, where he can provide an overview of the designs and implementation plans as it relates to Solar for All that will be implemented by the SCU starting October 1. David?
Great. Thank you, Lance. Good morning, everybody. It's nice to be here. Nice to talk with you. I think I've had the chance to meet most of the people in the room. If I haven't, and we do going forward, I'll look forward to talking with you about this. This morning, what I want to do is give you an overview of where we stand on the Solar for All program development. So I'm going to just briefly review where we stand with that. We started the contract mod 4, as you're aware, June 26th. So we're about halfway through a 90-day period to design and then be ready to launch the Solar for All, the new Solar for All initiative. Talk about some of the design goals that we're using to help design the program and some of the risks. I'm going to move a little bit the analysis that we've used to support some of the recommendations up, and then we'll talk about the proposed structure, the budget, and the impact estimates we're looking at over 3 years with the $32 million that Lance mentioned as part of contract mod 6. We're looking to have about 28 megawatts of installed capacity that will serve to provide solar benefits to about 8,000 households. So that's kind of where we're going, but I'll describe how we're hoping to get there. I'll give you a view into kind of what we think will be some of the scoring criteria, and then talk about what we're doing in terms of next steps and leave some time for discussion. So the DOE in this past year has requested the DCSEU to develop kind of a new complementary set of Solar for All initiatives that will complement the existing Solar for All grants and activities that are out there, but will be a dedicated element of DCSEU services funded through the REDF to help promote the ability for CREFs and other single-family installations to start making progress towards the Solar for All goals. So as I said, contract mod 4, Lance reviewed this earlier today, June 26th, and so we're now, again, about halfway through this 90 days of design and be ready to launch. The overall goals and risks that we see, we want to maximize rapid progress towards the Solar for All goals with the available funds this year. So the incentive, the Solar for All incentive, what we want to do is use that to procure commitments for 15 years of energy from new solar systems that will be available to provide credits, solar credits, to income-eligible households. So we'll be working closely with the DOE in terms of the CREF credit administration will be something downstream, but our focus and our objective here is to design something that installs new solar systems, and then we'll make those the electricity from those systems contractually obligated for the next 15 years to be available to serve low-income households. We're going to do that through community renewable energy facilities, or CREFs. I'll use the acronym CREF, and then through single-family solicitation. So we want to have a dual track. One of the things we'd really like to do with this is draw in both expertise as well as resources from the national solar industry to say DC is a good place to do solar. Why is it a good place? The economic returns can be favorable. The benefits are going to low-income households. You know, we can make money, and it's the nation's capital. It's a dense urban environment. We can do some things that will help to showcase solar in the ways that solar can help to benefit all people. So we want to use the potential for CREFs because of their better economies of scale, so the community renewable energy facilities, to really catalyze the long-term progress towards the Solar for All goals. We're talking about over the course of a longer period than these 3 years, there's a goal of up to 100,000 low-income households will be benefiting from solar. So we're talking about getting 8,000 household benefits from solar over the next 3 years, another 30 megawatts of capacity. What are the risks that we see? If we put out a solicitation that says, well, here's a Solar for All incentive, and the national industry or the incentive isn't rich enough, okay, we might not get the type of response that we want to see. The other thing, so to help offset that, we're going to provide some complementary service elements that will help to set the pipeline and help to really encourage folks to participate. And then I'll share with you the analysis we've been doing And the other thing is that while the Solar for All initiative, this new Solar for All initiative, will be important, it's not the only opportunity for entities in the district to go solar. If they want to do a market rate prep or they want to do commercial net metering, we don't want to unduly kind of guide people to say, well, the only way you can do solar right now is the Solar for All crap, for instance. So we want to be fair to the customer side of the market to say, Solar for All crap might work for you. Here's how it works. This is what the offer is. But you may also do commercial net metering or something else and play an appropriate balance. Sure.
Do CREF have to be physically located in DC?
Pretty close. There's some circuits in the outside, just close to Maryland, where CREFs can be located in this year. But yes, this is primarily build out in the district. And we're seeing the CREFs can be up to 5 megawatts. We're anticipating they're going to be in the order, the typical CREF will probably be in the order of 1 to 200 kW. So,
is the CREF by definition for low income?
No.
Okay.
No. So a CREF is a community renewable energy facility. It's got one single meter, and then I could distribute the CREF credits to everybody around the table if I wanted to. Okay? So again, the primary objectives for this and the activity that we're designing is to develop, run the solicitations, have subcontracts that will develop that solar capacity, and then there's going to be another structure that will then take the credits from those facilities and distribute them to low-income, income-eligible households. We've done, Damon Lane is in the back there, and then we're working with other folks at VEIC. We've done a lot of analysis to try to help us figure out the right level of incentive, right? You don't want it to be too rich so that there's undue, profits being made, but you also want to make sure that the incentives that are on the table make Solar for All a viable, both in the national context, where does the solar industry have opportunities to develop? We want to draw them to DC. And then within DC, we want Solar for All CREF not to be the only option, but a viable option for people to think, yes, I'd like to do this. So we've done, we used the National Renewable Energy Laboratory's System Advisor Model, SAM, which is publicly available, but is a fairly complicated tool to do a number of, we vary the cost for installation cost, the SREC term and the value of SRECs, the roof leasing costs, a whole number of different elements to look at analysis to see what the likely return to a developer would be. Combining those all, we've looked at over 2,400 combinations, and then we've started to do, with industry experts working in the district as well as third-party folks from the National Solar Industry Association, to review those and make sure that we're making reasonable assumptions about the costs and the returns that could be expected. What we think we'll end up doing is having kind of a target level of return, this Goldilocks level, where a project that's developed with good conditions would be likely to get more than a 15% internal rate of return, okay? So even if we use relatively conservative assumptions, there's still a rate of return for the developer that is consistent with what they would see in other markets and what they'd be doing if they were developing a non-Solar for All project in the district. We need to do this because it has to be able to compete in this open market, and the solar industry is a very competitive industry, so people are going to want to say, okay, this makes sense and we're seeing a benefit for participating, but not be too rich. Next slide. Okay. So this is one panel of, and as an example of those 2,400 combinations. And just, it's not meant to give you you don't have to understand the entire thing, but I'll show you just the structure. With system costs of $2 per watt, and we've varied that parameter, or a Solar for All incentive amount of $0 per watt or $1 per watt, SREC term, the number of years, the roof lease cost per year, and then the SREC value per megawatt hour. What we're looking at is ones that have a 0, the zeros in blue, are things where a Solar for All incentive, a Solar for All project is viable. So it would make sense. It would give that developer a 15% or greater return. And so that's kind of the sweet spot that we're looking at. So for instance, in the top with a $0, if your system cost is $2 per watt and the program incentive is $0, most of these, until you get to either relatively longer terms on a lease or a relatively high value for your SREC, they're not going to make sense for someone to say, I want to do a solar for all project. If we have a $1 per watt incentive, you'll see that these zeros, the blue zeros, populate more of the, become more viable, basically. So that is the type of analysis that we're using to, that's okay, it's the type of analysis we're using to help us judge what level of incentive to have be the cap for a competitive solicitation. I'll stop there to see if they're clarifying questions.
Well, I was just going to ask about the achievement of the payback and what time frame and how that fits with if this is a situation where people are leasing. If they're a
So the structure for the solicitation will be for us to put out a solicitation that says to the developers, what we want from you is a 15-year commitment of the electricity from this system to go to benefit low-income customers. Now, whether they own the system or whether, say, it's a single-family household, the single-family household owns the system, that will be part of what they are able to propose. But what we get out of this is a 15-year commitment for the electricity. So the ownership structure is slightly separate from that. It's a 15-year contractual commitment for the credits to go towards low-income households and benefit those.
And the credits are free, or are the credits tagged at a certain dollar per kilowatt hour?
The credits, thank you, that's a good clarifying point. The way Solar for All is being designed and what we're using this incentive level to set is saying that that CREF revenue, a market rate CREF, you might be collecting money from the individual low-income households or the households that are getting those credits. This will be designed, at least initially in the first year, that those credits are those are free. So those are distributed at no cost, so there's no revenue from the CREF credits. The return to the developer comes from the tax credits, accelerated depreciation, and the SREC market, importantly. So that's why part of this, the importance of looking at the SREC market, the terms and the structures on that, and the sensitivity to that is important in terms of determining this Solar for All incentive level. The other thing that I want to emphasize, though, is that while we're using an analysis to set a cap, this will be a competitive solicitation. So for the CREF, we say, Solar for All, here's an opportunity for you to participate at $1 per watt or better. And we will ask the industry to come and give us proposals that give their best shot about how much solar they can do, giving us a 15-year commitment going forward. So someone could bid, if our cap is at $1 per watt, they could bid at 84 cents or 85 cents. Let me go through some of the rest of the slides. If you're clarifying question on this, Bill.
On the SRECs, most of the developers will probably want to guarantee SRECs fee and lock that over that 15-year period. How would you handle that?
That's up to them.
Okay.
So they're the industry, they're the solar industry, and what you need to do is offer something that we can say, look, we've reviewed these, and if, for instance, with $1 per watt, if you can get, and your leasing roof cost is $9,000 per year, and your installed cost is 2 years, if you can get a 5-year strip at better than $100 per SREC, okay, that's going to give them a 15% return or better. So we're doing kind of the analysis that they'll be looking at to say, is this rich enough for us to bid into? Yes, it is. But the risk, the SREC revenue generation, all of that stuff, how they handle that risk is all on them. And that's why we want to have the solar industry that is familiar with these things, that has good projects, that are ready, knows how to deal with this, knows how to make a performance guarantee. That's the type of bidding that we want to see in this program.
So earlier, I just have one question. Earlier you mentioned about the dense urban environment that we have in the district. And I hear from my members the existing dilemmas of the physical constraints of putting solar
Yeah.
on their rooftops.
Yeah.
So who do you feel like is your client? Is it new construction? Or are you thinking existing buildings? Because I'm just, in my mind, I'm trying to play out if I am producing,
Right.
Enough solar that
Yep.
I want to offset my needs.
Yep.
And then offer those credits to potentially low income
Yep.
citizens.
Yep.
Are we talking, a de minimis amount now that we're able to give?
No, you're not. Some of them could be hybrid, where some of it is commercial net metering, and some of that goes to the building owner. The SFA incentive would only go to that portion that provides the 15-year forward contract obligation. It can be existing construction, it can be new construction. There are potential studies, and there's been good work done here. There's enough roof space in the district to do this, to do much more than this, what we're talking about. It's not happening right now. What we want is to bring the solar industry's best resources to really accelerate it. And so that's the objective. But there are enough roofs, and there's, and it's going to take, it's a blend of different building types and all these different things. So we'll talk about how these are the different elements that we'll try to do to build this out. Let me go through, if I can, a few more slides, and then we'll see if there are other questions for clarification. So we see 4 complementary program elements. The single family solar for all competitive solicitation. We anticipate in the first year about $1.2 million of the incentives will go towards that. The single family elements and all the other ones include this 15-year solar for all credit commitment. Okay, the solar for all CREF, we expect this to be the largest component. As I said, we really want to catalyze the market to bring projects at scale that can be more cost effective to do this. So we anticipate around $6 million, around $1 per watt. The single family is likely to be a cap of around $2 per watt, but $6 million at $1 per watt. That'll be the majority. If the strength to a competitive solicitation for these first 2 elements that we put out is very strong, all of the incentive dollars may be taken up by these 2 elements. Then we have some backstop, what I'll call the backup or backstop. Custom engagement. There are DCSEU customers who are already interested in solar and would like to do solar, and maybe solar for all is a good way for them to go. Is a CREF a good thing for them to do, or a commercial net metering? If we've done this solicitation and there's not enough interest to use up all the incentives appropriately, we could offer some direct incentives, but in any case, we'll be able to provide these customers with knowledge about either the program going forward for a future solicitation, or if there's money left over in the incentives, we'll provide backstop here. Then a third backup element is kind of more customer targeted. If, based on folks who are already interested in solar and the competitive solicitation, we haven't seen enough engagement, we may go out and more actively try to cultivate customers directly and say, wouldn't you like to do solar? Here's the solar for all that, and that type of thing. And again, they'll kind of waterfall down. So we have those 4 different elements, $9.2 million in the first year of incentives. Next slide. Over the 3 years, roughly, we're looking at this 12 million, 10 million, 10 million. Of that, about $25 million will be in incentives over the course, and then about $7.2 million in the non-incentive costs during the time period. These are the preliminary budget numbers. Next slide. And what we expect to get from that, as I said, if you look over on the total, for 3 years, about 28 megawatts of capacity, the majority of it coming from the CREF solicitation, some from the single family, and then a smaller amount from these backup elements that we're anticipating. The megawatt hours that are generated by a full year of the first year's participation, so once the 8.5 megawatts are installed, each year they'll be generating about 10,300 megawatt hours. That'll serve 2,500 households. By the end of the time, we'd be generating enough credits to serve about 8,000 low-income households with credits that offset 50% of their energy bill for no cost again. This gives you a little bit of detail on the CREF and the single-family solicitations. As I said, we're going to put out a competitive solicitation that has a cap, so $1 per watt or better. Based on the strength, we may award a lower amount of incentives to the CREF or relatively high. So we're going to leave that flexibility to try to encourage the maximum response, the best bang for the buck that we can get from the money that's available for this. Number of households served and the CREF credits, anticipated annual value of the CREF credits each year. The single family, as I said, will have a higher cap. It would probably be something on the order of $2 per watt or better. Again, asking folks to bid in, and you see the numbers there. Got 2 more slides, I think 3 more slides. Run through these quickly. This is a draft of what we're anticipating the solicitation and the scoring, say for the CREF solicitation might look like. We're trying to maximize the benefits for the price per watt, the total capacity their developer would propose that would be serving solar for all, their output for installed capacity, team experience and quality, project readiness, innovation, and then certified business entities will also get some points. Project readiness is going to be very important. So developers that can come with site control or already financial commitments to do these types of things would be important. But we think, again, if we engage the larger solar developers, having folks that could do a megawatt or more, multiple megawatts under the CREF solicitation at multiple sites is possible, and that's what we're aiming for. Next slide. So we are today, we're about halfway through this time period. We shared last week, we had a very good meeting with the DOE staff to review a more detailed, we've got about a 35-page document that goes into more depth than the slides that we're sharing today. We've gotten feedback initially from that. We're meeting again next week to take further feedback on that. We are drafting, our team is working on the draft solicitations currently, more detailed than what I had in there, and other elements where by the beginning of October we would be ready to launch the program. And yeah, sure.
So I'm a huge proponent of solar, but I want to know that, and it's 28 megawatts, which on the one hand is a lot, on the other hand isn't that much. But
yeah,
is this energy source being tied in any way to energy storage? Let me ask these 3 questions.
It's not.
Okay. Is it being tied in, or is it being thought about in any way being tied towards the microgrid concept of redundancy, reliability, and security, and or as the electric utility?
Yes.
Just come back to the room for 2 minutes. Betty Ann's on the phone.
Yeah. Those are excellent questions.
Have they opined in any way at what point, as other utilities are experiencing in other parts of the country, how much solar is too much solar that begins to disrupt the system? Because it isn't.
Okay. Lance, go back up to the scoring slide. That's an excellent question. I may have answered a little too quickly. So there is some scoring for the innovation. It will not be a requirement that something like this be tied to storage, be part of a microgrid, or be located necessarily where Pepco says this is the most favorable place. Those will not be strict requirements, but we will allow folks, if any of those those are the ways that they could earn some points in the competitive solicitation by saying this is being located in a place where the grid can support and actually needs that level of generation, or we're doing this with, for instance, some storage that will provide emergency backup through, it's on a district building and it's going to provide emergency backup services and that type of thing. You would get points for that under this solicitation. However, our primary objective in this is to get that commitment of the 15-year forward generation. So it's important, and yes, it will be an element. Maybe we should, so up to 15 points on the innovation piece.
So, I would just say, I'm sorry, Betty, let me just say this. I actually very much want to hear from you. But I respectfully suggest that this first go round is, it seems, just to get this program started.
Yeah.
But that contemporaneous with that, going forward, I think those other things really ought to be foremost planning process.
We intend.
Yeah. This is Betty Ann. I referenced a couple of things. In terms of 28 megawatts is really a big boost. Currently installed solar that is certified. I mean, there is some solar where they're not selling the credits, they're not certified. Is in the district itself is about 65, 56 megawatts.
Okay.
And that's after, 10 years, so this would be a 50% increase. To meet the 5% requirement of either solar or alternative compliance fees in the current law, by I think 2032 is the 5%. It's something like 250 will be needed. So, to use less electricity, that's the percentage of sales, maybe a little, like 230 or so.
Yeah.
So, this is still only, again, it will help, but it's not going to do it.
Right.
John, as you talked to, TEPCO has an online tool now, because where each feeder by feeder, the capacity to handle solar differs. That's all online. And under to your last point, under the MESDIS program, we've just set up the working group there. There is a working group on non-wires alternatives and looking at congestion and capacity and things like that.
Yep.
So yes, I think in the future, I did have a question for just for the design of the CREPs themselves. Two questions. Number one, at 100 to 200, kilowatts, what's the size of the roof that's going to be needed to handle that, and how many subscribers, how many households would that serve?
What we've been looking at.
The CREPs are set up as a subscriber organization where, individuals subscribe to get the electricity from a facility. It doesn't. The CREP doesn't serve the facility where it's located, physically located. It subscribers. But I try to imagine, 100 to 200 kilowatt hours, is about what size the system in terms of, that's not a single family house.
No. That's a commercial rooftop typically. And so,
like an office building.
Yes. Yeah. And it's going to depend on the complementary uses of the roof and the infrastructure, the age of the building, all of those different things. We've been using 4,200 kWh per year as the credit amount for calculations in terms of what offsets half of a low-income family's household energy use. And I think your point is a very good one on both for the solar for all long-term goals and the RPS goals, solar long-term goals. This is an important increase in the amount of build-out, but it's just a start on a much longer path towards meeting these higher targets. So 8,000 towards 90,000 or 100,000 households, 10%, 30 megawatts towards, around the 200 to 300 megawatts that are going to be required. It's again roughly about 10% over the next 3 years. It's a significant increase from where the market is today. We want to get the solar industry involved. It's possible to do it. And I think that, we want to be really thoughtful about designing this program so that we get that level of engagement. So the last slide has my email on it, and we really want to be engaged with all of you, with the other stakeholders. We're planning to have, we've tentatively planned for potentially next week or the week after, to soon have a solar stakeholder meeting and be sharing again the draft program design with the solar stakeholders as well. We have this dual objective of get this designed and be ready to launch quickly, while at the same time make sure you talk with everybody and consider every possible issue that's going to come up. We're going to get the program up and running and So we really appreciate your feedback and thoughts, and we're available to talk. We
So
can,
can I just ask, just to
Sure.
make sure if I understand, this is or isn't something that will go towards the FEU's achievement of the benchmark?
this is separate from, this would be
This is
REDF.
renewable energy development fund money that is separate and apart from the goals that we have under our current contract that must be achieved with the Sustainable Energy Trust Fund. So you will get a report in a matter of minutes about where we are in terms of the use of our SETF dollars for our 1 megawatt a year goal for solar with our SETF. This is above and beyond.
So again, I guess I would have a question as to whether or not there's any thought given towards leveraging SEU dollars and or other approaches that would again have the SEU doing what the SEU, charged for doing, which is achieving the benchmarks in the statute.
And
as opposed to becoming a contractor essentially.
So if I can add, basically the benchmarks in the main contract are based on 20 million of funding each year, right? So if you were to, this is a substantial sum of money. If you were to add 12 million in additional funding, we would have to tweak those benchmarks to be higher. And this was a way of cleanly separating this 12 million such that we don't have to tweak those benchmarks. That was the idea.
And I think too, your question about kind of complementary efforts, the custom engagement and the customer targeted platform will be working with the account managers. So say somebody works with the grocery stores or the schools or the hospitals. They will help them understand this is what a CREF Solar for All looks like. If necessary, we can help them actually run a solicitation to get a developer to work with them if they're interested in Solar for All. So the market presence that the DCSEU has will help this program succeed, and this program will help the DCSEU be providing its customers, whether they're interested in efficiency or now potentially Solar for All, meet their objectives. So it's not as though we'll, as Suzanne was saying, they're separate for the contract perspectives, but in terms of services that you can offer to folks when you're talking with them, we'll integrate those and blend those, together to try to be customer focused. If people are interested in solar, we can describe these options. We can help them understand solar and efficiency opportunities.
Concerned that the DCSU staff would be focused on this.
Well, in the entire program design of this, we've kind of separated out the budget so that folks like David Hill and some other folks that will be hired to manage this operation is separate and apart from the regular DCSU staff that's implementing the SETF objectives. Prior to this amendment, David wasn't involved in this process, neither was some of the other folks that are currently working on this initiative. But if I can add, Becky, one other point to consider. If we were to blend this with the existing benchmarks, it would require some careful analysis. More importantly, we only have $12 million that we know of that's available. The remainder of the $30 million is really subject to how much we're collecting from the RDF. If we design benchmarks and increase them based on the assumption that we'll keep getting this money from the RDF in FY20 and 21, and it don't materialize, it completely messes up the balance in terms of the performance benchmarks that we're setting for the DCSU contract, because it wouldn't just be the renewable energy benchmark, it'll be the low income benchmark, it'll be the leverage funds benchmark. Everything will change across the board.
Could we have sub-benchmarks targeted at this funding that only lasts for the duration of the funding?
Well, this program of itself will have certain goals that has to be achieved, but it wouldn't be tied into the existing benchmarks.
This program will have capacity goals for each year. So one of the slides.
It seems like there may be some complementarity that we'll see somewhere in a report. It's for me at least kind of abstract. That these things will complement one another, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think it's maybe we recognize that it's a little bit of a change in SE mission. I mean, to add programs and funds that are entirely separate from what the SEU started as, and it may be achieving the capacity goals of those other programs, but it isn't the objectives and the benchmarks of the SEU.
No.
The underlying legislation anticipated that the role of the SEU would expand.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, this doesn't, I think one of the things that you could have is you could potentially confuse how well benchmarks, the existing benchmarks are being met by adding this in as well. So keeping them.
I'm sorry.
It would be integrating them, which could obviously impact the actual outcomes associated with it because it's really bifurcated and separated and it's distinguishable. What you're talking about is an element of integration, and
Yeah.
that's not what this particular proposal in any way is accomplishing.
Yeah. So again, I'm not saying it's necessarily a bad thing. If there is expansion, it was called for originally, and it is happening.
Yeah.
I guess I just wonder if it means that we should be, again, looking at the benchmarks themselves, because if there's, other utility or function being found in other arenas that are separate from the benchmarks, then it sort of raises the question of the continued utility of the benchmarks and or where they're set.
It's also partially, I think a good way to look at it is from the customer perspective, from the market perspective. There are folks out there that want to do significant energy efficiency projects with the DCSEU. Some of them are also interested in solar. And this Solar for All initiative might be a good way for them to go, or they might just decide, I'd like to do a commercial net metering. I don't have enough roof space to do a CREF. It sounds like a good idea, but I'm not going to do that. So we need to kind of be, somewhat neutral, but also say, no, Solar for All CREF is a good opportunity for you too. Maybe it maps onto your stuff. So I think that you can still have, this program will have capacity objectives, budgets, milestones for its activities, and then the existing DCSEU has those as well, and the board and others would continue to look at those as a combined, different tracks of the same entity.
Will the progress be reported in the quarterly and annual reports for the SEU?
Part of our meeting next week, the agenda is to talk about the tracking and reporting and how we're going to integrate that. So if you all and the others would like to start getting updates on this program kind of in a similar format as a separate section, that type of thing might make sense. It would be efficient and probably make a lot of sense.
But this is better, yeah. I think what we did is that this is not SEU, SCTS. This is a program. This is separate, and it's got separate legislation and a separate revenue stream.
Yeah.
And I think it's important, going back to the discussion of benchmarks, et cetera. Obviously, things should be coordinated. We don't want the left hand not doing the right hand doing, but the revenue stream for this is really market-based.
Yep.
The maximum that could come in terms of compliance fee, where the money comes from, is the cap is set by law. But unlike the SEU money, the SCTF money, where there's kind of a guaranteed amount every year, because of the assessment on the customers, this really, the amount of money that comes in and no charge of compliance fees, which was $25 million last year, was the result of, a market decision by primarily the developers that they were going to, or the retail suppliers, rather, they're going to pay the alternative compliance fee rather than by the REX. REX is selling at $385 SREX right now, which is the highest in the country. But as more solar comes in, then, the price may go down. So I do think it's important that they be kept separately, separate contracts, separate streams, separate, et cetera, but that there be coordination, certainly, and options, and having VEIC do it. This contract with VEIC, right? Not with SEU.
Yes, it is VEIC, the contract is with, but VEIC manages the DCSEU.
So it is separate, but obviously coordination and having options is for the customer and the potential developer. I think it's kind of exciting.
I had a quick question for the developer for this, for those systems. Does it have to be a for-profit only, or would the solicitation say for-profit, non-profit?
I don't anticipate that we would have a requirement that it would be for-profit. I don't anticipate that we'll have a set-aside for non-profits. So,
Actually, this is Betty Ann. The CREP law allows the CREP to be any form of business, that profit or non-profit.
In terms of the host site, you're saying, or the developer?
As any kind of business, they could be for-profit.
Yeah, I was just asking if the solicitation actually said here the eligible offers to participate in the solicitation.
For the host sites or for as the solar developer?
As the solar developer.
It wouldn't, I don't think it would be restricted. I think it would be open.
Can I just?
Yeah, the CREP one, it should be a CREP.
Just really quickly, as a contract matter, just to follow up on what Chairman Kane said. I think what was piquing my discussion or leading to my confusion was that there is a line item in the contract modification that we saw at the beginning of the morning, in the, for lack of a better term, SEU contract. It's a VEIC contract, it's not an SEU contract, but it's in the same basket.
No, it's part of it's an amendment to the SEU contract. It's not a separate contract with you guys.
Right. So it's in the same contract as the SEU.
Yes.
It's just
it's a different
separately.
So the quote expansion of SEU programs are technically do embody this. It's the same contract. And I don't know that the board has any function, really, except maybe, helping to ensure coordination, because the board does look at the SEU and its achievement of performance benchmarks out of SETF money, and not its use of other money to achieve capacity goals, except again, maybe the most abstract way to coordinate them. But I do think it's confusing that they're all in the same contract, or how they arose to be in the same contract with the same contractor. Editorial. Okay, thank you.
Thank you all very
much.
I apologize because today is my mother's 84th birthday, so I'm going to go jump on a plane to Pittsburgh, but I'm going to disappear. But I'm happy to talk afterwards if people have questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so to the EM&B.
All right, next up we have Tom Malden from MMR Group that will present the findings of their assessment of the CSU's FY17 performance against the benchmarks.
Great. Yeah, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. Again, my name is Tom Malden. I'm with NMR Group, and so I'll be representing the evaluation team today and be focusing on the FY2017 evaluation results. So here's an overview of the agenda. I wanted to give everybody a quick refresher on the NMR team, the VR team, and then dive into the FY2017 evaluation results, cost effectiveness, and then a summary. So the team here, NMR Group, we're the prime. We've got 4 subcontractors: Ecometric Consulting, Demand Side Analytics. My colleague Lana from Demand Side Analytics is on the phone. And then we've got 2 certified business enterprise subcontractors, UPAP Labs and SAFE. And I will, given that we're running a little behind, I will try and run through my slides pretty quickly, but please stop me if you have any questions. So as you may know, we came on board at the end of March, and so we got a little bit of a late start on the FY2017 evaluation. Due to the desire to have the performance benchmark assessment completed as soon as possible, we went with a streamlined evaluation approach this year. The objectives were primarily to assess the performance benchmarks, but also to verify energy savings and then also perform cost effectiveness analysis. Because of the abbreviated time frame, we emphasized gross savings verification. So this mostly comprised desk reviews for selected programs. So that basically means that we reviewed the program tracking data from SEU and then individual files for selected projects just to confirm the accuracy and assess the reasonableness of the savings calculations. For programs that did not undergo evaluation in FY2017, we applied default values, mostly from historical realization rates from prior years. In some cases, we used realization rates that we developed this year for other programs with similar measures. And then we did a cost-effectiveness analysis. This slide here just gives a quick overview of the FY 2017 savings by sector and by program. So on the left, you can see that commercial sector represented about 83% of total energy savings. This is combined electric and gas savings. Retail is 11%, low income 5%. Obviously, commercial is the dominant sector there. On the right shows the sectors as well as the programs, and then the percentage of energy saving as well. I would just point that the 3 custom programs, which are part of the commercial sector, represent probably 65–70% or so of the total energy savings. So these are the 3 commercial programs that contribute the most savings.
Is there some sort of residual residential savings, or is that
well, yeah, I mean, there is some savings. It's just rounding. It's essentially less than 0.5%.
There's no other programs for residential other than those 2.
In FY 2017, there are retail programs.
Yes.
So we've got residential, and these are basically 2. I believe they're both low-income programs. Is my understanding. And then we've got retail.
Okay, I see. You're organized.
Yeah. Yeah, and then we've got retail programs down there, which is retail lighting, efficient appliances, light food bank, and efficient products. So you've got a couple residential programs, but then we've got the retail programs that also serve residential.
Okay.
Even the low-income multifamily programs,
Right.
you could put that into the residential.
Oh yeah,
Right.
my
So you got
guys
that.
just gravitated to the residential being
0.
Oh, okay.
Right. Yeah.
retail. I was thinking in my head was more commercial.
Okay.
Okay, this slide here shows the performance benchmark summary. On the left, so there's 2 types of benchmarks. We've got annual, those benchmarks with annual targets, which is most of them listed here. On the bottom, there is one 5-year cumulative target. So we've got the benchmarks listed: reducing electricity consumption, reducing gas consumption, increasing renewable energy generation capacity, improving energy at low-income properties. We've got has 2 benchmarks: expenditures and savings, and then increasing collar jobs. We've got the verified results, which is what the evaluation team came up with in terms of energy savings, capacity, and expenditures. And then on the next column over is the minimum benchmark. So, for example, electricity consumption, the results were 92,360 megawatt hours. The target was 60,878. And it was achieved. And we've got similar framework for the other performance benchmarks. As you can see, the DCSU achieved all 6 of the minimum benchmarks with have annual targets. Over on the right, we've got the maximum benchmarks, what the targets are, and then whether these benchmarks were achieved. They were achieved for these top 3 benchmarks here, but not for these bottom 2 for low-income savings and then green-collar jobs. The last benchmark, as I noted, is a 5-year cumulative target. It's leveraging external funds. There was about 440,000 in external funds obtained in FY 2017. The target is about 2.5 million at a minimum for the minimum, and then the maximum is 5 million. Any questions on this slide? Okay, so this slide here takes a little closer look.
I'm sorry. And when the EM&B report comes out, will there be discussion or narrative as to speaking on why the maximum benchmarks were not achieved in the 2 categories?
There is a draft version of the report. It's actually in your folder, I believe. And Lance, I don't know if it's been emailed out as well.
Yeah, it's in the folder.
This was okay.
It's in the folder, and we emailed this out last.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, last week.
It's not this.
Right. So We could certainly add some discussion with that, and we would probably have to communicate with SEU about what factors lead into those particular benchmarks. But certainly that's a big comment. We can certainly add some more.
Okay, thank you. I mean, because I guess one of the questions I have is that last year, one of the contract modifications, which may not apply to this year's evaluation, had to do with separating the achievement of the low income spend from the overall spend because of the floating, whatever.
That is incorporated in benchmarks.
So I guess the question is something like that, a reason for not achieving the maximum benchmark, or are there other potential reasons? And I don't know if that's you all or from elsewhere, but.
The explanation as to why any maximum targets were missed would really come from the DCSEU. What MMR is charged with is really verifying the amount that the DCSEU have reported. So take, for example, they missed the maximum target on the low-income benchmark. We would need to ask the SEU to explain why they missed the maximum mark on the low-income benchmark.
Okay, thank you.
Were you verifying benchmarks for CBE participation?
We did not. That was not part of the contract.
No, that is done as part of the financial audit that we did earlier in the year, and it verified that they have exceeded their CBE goal that the city had set for FY17. So there are two sets of assessments that are done with the DCSU. MMR is really for the energy savings and the green jobs and so forth. When we do the financial audit, we get into verifying whether or not they've met those CBE spending targets, because the auditor will look at the receipts, they will look at CBE certification and so forth to determine that they did actually provide those funding to CBE.
Well, the reason why I ask is because the green jobs is a direct correlation of CBE opportunity. Most of those jobs will come from the CBE that get contracts. So that's why it's questioning why you would measure the green jobs, not the CBE.
We measure both. We measure green jobs creation and there's a CBE spending. And you are correct, a portion of this 84 jobs that you're looking at came through subcontractor work through CBEs. I believe it was maybe 30 or 32. The breakdown is in the report in terms of the jobs that came. Let me see that exact number.
That high from CBEs, but clearly, yes, you're right.
But it's in the financial audit, which we haven't yet received.
Yeah, no, I just thought they were reading that.
No, we did the financial audit earlier, since pretty much beginning of this fiscal year when FS Taylor came in and presented the findings.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what about the two benchmarks that used to be numeric and are now narrative? Are those part of this contract?
Tracking.
Tracking?
Tracking.
Yes, we've reported on those in terms of tracking goals, and I think Tom put together a slide on those tracking goals here on the bottom.
Yeah, right. We'll get to that in a minute.
Thank you. Okay.
So this slide here just shows the percentage achievement for each of the 6 benchmarks within targets.
I'm sorry.
Obviously, so for each, we've got the 6 benchmarks across the bottom here. For each, we've got the percent of minimum target, the percent of maximum target, and then a line of 100%. As you, of course, because the minimum targets are smaller than the maximum target, the percentages are always higher for these dark green bars. In terms of portfolio electric savings, gas savings, obviously DCSU exceeded the minimum benchmarks by a substantial degree and met the maximum benchmarks as well. Renewable capacity obviously exceeded the minimum benchmark by 350% and exceeded the maximum benchmark by more than double as well. So pretty strong performance there. Obviously on the low income side, the low income savings was 124% of minimum, but about 62% of maximum targets. So obviously a shortfall there. They met the low income spend by a couple percent. And then for green jobs, met the minimum benchmark by about 27% over and fell just shy of the maximum benchmark. So these are the two opportunities in terms of reaching the maximum benchmarks. Green jobs was very close to reaching it. And low income savings was a fair amount short. Next slide. So this looks at the cumulative benchmark. As I noted in the earlier slide, the one cumulative benchmark is leveraging external funds, about 440,000. And funding was obtained, and that's about 18% of the minimum target and 9% of the maximum target. As this was the first year of a 5-year contract, the 18% figure is about a fifth of the way towards the minimum target. So it seems to be on track. And the two tracking goals that Vicky just mentioned are reducing growth and peak demand. There's no target there, but we verified 12,360 kilowatts. And in terms of reducing growth in the energy demand of largest energy users, we verified that SEU completed projects with about 104 large customers.
So there's no numeric target, but do we have sense, or is this something, and I apologize, I missed the report in the package, do we know if it's up or down from last year? Or, like just for ease of
I believe it's similar, as I recall, it's similar to last year. I think it was around 100% in the prior year.
And is that something for ease of presentation included in this year's?
Sure.
Usually just 17. I'd like to see what those numbers were in 16.
Yeah, because we don't have a numeric target. But
Right,
it just
right.
might give a sense of
Right.
good,
The
bad.
numeric target under the old contract, the largest energy users was 50. That would have been last. So you can see more than double.
I think numbers like that would be helpful for presentation and discussion purposes.
Certainly.
Thanks.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure, any options, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And this is reduce the reduction in the district-wide peak demand, or is this tied to the projects that SEU has done?
This is tied to the projects that SEU.
Are there publicly available numbers on district-wide peak demand 2016, 2017 to see sort of what percentage this is?
Off the top of my head, I don't know those numbers, but others of them probably.
No, I think we can work with Pepco to get that
We can get
information.
that to you.
But do we include that also in the report? Again, just
Yes.
for presentation purposes, I think. Or the board's report.
Those are good points.
Right.
So, are there any questions on the benchmark assessment? I'm going to move on to the cost assessment, which is a related but separate portion of the presentation. Okay, so this slide here shows the costs of saved energy. Basically, just looking at how much it costs the SEU in FY 2017 to obtain energy savings. We've got broken into three buckets here. Electric savings, excluding renewable projects, electric savings from renewables only, and then gas savings, excluding renewables projects. So for DCSU, we calculated the cost as $163 per watt hour. It's almost the same as was found in Pennsylvania for a similar time period. And both of those are a fair amount lower than Maryland at $250. It's important to note that Pennsylvania and Maryland do have different regulatory requirements that can affect their costs, as does DCSU. So it's not exactly an apples-to-apples comparison, but it does provide some perspective on the costs.
So that was one question that I did have, which was that I know that the board spent a fair amount of time in last year's annual report commenting that Maryland was saying that they have the most helpful points of comparison because of the different programs. So, and I know that you all had a short amount of time this year. Is there anything else that's around that people know of that might be better points of comparison?
My sense would be every state has a different regulatory environment and structure, so I don't know if we're going to find one apples-to-apples comparison that's a direct comparison. We can certainly look around to see which other areas have similar, I do think that DC is unique with the benchmarks. I'm not familiar with that, but we can certainly look around and see what we can find in terms of similar regions that might be good points of comparison.
would it make sense? Are there cities specifically that have targets like this? I'm just looking at the high number, the 236 per megawatt hour for renewables. That might be related to a lack of space and sort of difficult environment for solar on rooftops. Are there any cities that we could sort of take these figures from instead of statewide programs?
Right. You know, I mean, I think DC is also unique in that it's running its own energy efficiency programs and renewable energy programs. I'm not aware of other cities that have their own programs. Typically, typically they're statewide programs. We can look around to see if there's any city-specific results. I have to say I haven't seen that anywhere, but again, we can do some further research and see.
I mean, I guess as the evaluator, do you find the comparison to Pennsylvania and Maryland to be
Yeah, I mean, they're neighboring states with similar markets, demographics, other characteristics. I think we acknowledge in the report that it's not a direct comparison, but it is useful to assess what the costs of savings are for DC versus other areas.
I mean, not to sort of restate the obvious, but DC is like a city-state where 70% of the energy uses in buildings and 30% roughly is residential, and we don't have, either traditional industries or farmland or whatever. So, either one of those states, if we're looking at Philadelphia, that might be a better comparison than looking at Pennsylvania.
Right, and we can certainly look into that. I'm not aware of any city-specific data available, but it doesn't mean it's not out there. So we can certainly search for it and see what we can find.
This is studying actually residential electricity consumption in terms of single meter residential is only 15% of the load in the district, which is very unusual.
Even better. I didn't realize.
But that doesn't count, the master meter, the apartment buildings where there's just one meter for the building, but the single meter where the resident themselves has control over it, it's only 15%. And 70% of our residents are renters, which is a big thing. But there might be some cities, probably not East Coast cities, where there are municipal, public power, municipally owned electric systems that have programs that could be looked at in comparison. But it is hard to isolate Philadelphia, Baltimore, Boston, which would be the comparable cities.
Right, that's a good point about the munis. Certainly we can look at that.
Just one thought. I'm sorry, go ahead, Chairman Kane.
No, I was just going to say the municipals, but they're mostly not on the East Coast, where you would have the same kinds of climate, other kinds of conditions that would make it useful there more. Any of the large cities, communities like Austin, et cetera, are a different climate.
Just one comment regarding the section.
California, San Diego.
Donna's raised her
No,
hand, so,
that's okay. No, just one commentary. As you indicated, Vicki, when we were going through our annual report, I know that we had offered some language within that report that talked a little bit about the distinctions between Maryland versus the District of Columbia and numerous variables based on the term of some of these programs as well as the mandates that are associated with the programs as well. And so we'll look just to ensure that those caveats and distinctions are really captured within that section because it's just important from our perspective.
Right. I think we do have some language on that in the report, but if there's elements that you think should more context to be added, we certainly So there's the comparison to Pennsylvania and Maryland, which I think we've covered. Obviously, electric savings from renewables, as expected, are the costs a little bit higher than they are from standard energy efficiency projects. Gas savings, excluding renewables projects, came into about $3 a therm. Down the bottom here, I do have a couple items just for the low-income programs. The electric cost came in at about $607 per megawatt hour, about roughly 4 times what it costs for the $163 cost up here. It's pretty consistent nationally. There's a LBNL report that found that costs for low-income programs are typically 5 times what they are for other programs. So pretty in line with what was found in that study. Obviously, gas costs are quite a bit higher as well.
Is this something also that you put into your drug?
Yeah, that's the report. So cost effectiveness testing, we undertook cost effectiveness testing of my 2017 programs. We used the societal cost test, which is required for the SEU programs. The test does try and reflect the full benefits of the programs. The slide here shows both the costs and the benefits. On the cost side are incremental measure costs, program administration costs, evaluation costs as well. On the benefits, we've got avoided energy costs, both electric and gas, avoided generating capacity costs, avoided transmission distribution capacity costs, avoided water costs, and then we get into some of the externalities, reduced risk, increased reliability. There's a 5% adder for that. Reduced operations and maintenance costs, benefits from greenhouse gas emissions, $100 per ton for CO2. And then non-energy benefits, there is a 5% adder for non-energy benefits. This includes a variety of benefits: comfort, noise reduction, health and safety, productivity. Kind of reflects a diverse range of benefits. And for this particular year, we updated the avoided energy costs, generating capacity costs, and transmission and distribution capacity costs for our analysis.
Where'd you get the greenhouse gas avoided costs? $100.
$100 per ton was, I believe that's from a memo that came out about a year or so ago from SEU. There is a report source for that. Off the top of my head, I don't remember what it is, but that's what's been used for cost effectiveness testing at least for 2 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
EGMs.
So we ran a few different scenarios. The first one we term a modified replica. Essentially, we wanted to make sure that our testing matched what SEU had performed using the same numbers. We did that, came up with similar results, and then we made a few modifications to that. The portfolio benefit cost ratio was 2.25 in that scenario. The second scenario was where we updated the avoided costs. As I mentioned, we updated the avoided energy costs and capacity costs. That decreased the benefit cost ratio to 1.93. Then we started moving in and adding some of the evaluation results. So the third scenario here is verified gross savings. So this takes the avoided cost scenario and then uses the verified gross savings rather than reported gross savings. That declined the ratio slightly, just under 1.89. Final scenario incorporates net savings. So in this case, we applied net to gross ratio to estimate the savings, reduce the net savings induced by the programs to account for free ridership and spillover. That reduces it down to 1.76. So, overall, in each of these scenarios, the portfolio is cost effective, fairly strongly cost effective, and well above 1. So it's certainly a positive outcome. We did run cost effectiveness testing at the program level as well. All the programs came back cost effective except for the 2 programs that we discussed briefly earlier that have been qualified. I believe those programs were not cost effective prior evaluations.
And again, also, is there an ability to include in the report an indication of trend, how that compares with last year's?
We can certainly do that. Yep.
Do you already have any projection of next year? A projection of next year? We're looking sort of backwards and forwards.
You're talking about for 18. This is the current. In terms of cost effectiveness or in terms of energy results?
Cost effectiveness, the kinds of measures that we would expect. I'm just asking.
The income qualified program is one that is yielding better results. The Home Performance of Energy Star program is one that turned in. So these numbers would probably be a little bit better. But I don't want to sit here and speculate this early. Still have 40 days left to get through. 18, sorry.
No, it was just a
A lot of
question.
projects
Yeah,
are yet
that's
to come
fine.
in, so.
I think it'd be helpful to see last year, compared to last year.
So in summary, the SEU achieved minimum targets for all 6 annual benchmarks, achieved the maximum target for 5 annual benchmarks. And entering into at this point, closing out the second year of the 5-year contract, there's opportunity to leverage external funds to create more jobs and realize savings from some longer-term projects. So again, 2 maximum benchmarks that were not met were low energy savings and jobs. So there's some opportunity with a long-term contract and external funds to try and reach those maximum benchmarks in the future. SEU is delivering programs at a cost on par with or better than the neighboring states, and we'll certainly see if we can find some cities to provide a more direct comparison. And then overall, the portfolio is cost effective to a significant degree, more cost effective.
Yeah, so this may sound like a really nitpicky thing, but as an English major, I can't help myself. So the thing you have as executive summary is not an executive summary. That's maybe background as to how you were contracted. That might be your executive summary. You might want to think about starting out with, and then getting into the report. So just a suggestion.
Also, 2 things. One, typically in a document like this, I normally see an assumption section. So I would recommend you do that. Assumptions.
I'm sorry, you said assumptions for?
Just an assumption sections on some of the calculation of to help out with some of the data. You don't have to. I'm saying I've seen some assumption sections in assessment reports.
Well, we did lay out the assumptions for cost effectiveness testing in terms of the methodology to verify savings and so forth. It's described in this report and even earlier. It was a combination of desk audits and examination of the algorithms that were used by the DCSEU, so they are spelled out in the report. And John, just to your point, the executive summary for this report, it's pages 1 through 6. It's not just the first couple of paragraphs here. The entire first 6 pages is really a summary of the report and the findings. And then we go into great detail about each benchmark and the performance testing to follow.
Okay, well, I mean, it just would be, perhaps would go into these 6 pages a little bit more, something like that, something, or in front of those 6 pages. It's just you can do this any way you want. I always look at these things as if somebody who knows nothing about the SEU or this would be like,
True, but this presentation came from those 6 pages. If you looked at what's presented here, it's what we put in a PowerPoint slide. So
I think it was just suggested.
Yeah,
just a suggestion.
Rejected.
Yeah, it's not. I'm not trying to. I'm actually.
Personally, but.
I'm actually trying to be helpful in that critical. I
I
think you've done a lot of good work, and it would be. You would explain yourself better if you had what I suggested in those views.
And I have one more thing. Is this DC?
This is, yeah.
This is DC?
I can't say, I don't know where, but
I'm
we could try and track down where's the photo.
Yeah,
Our editor's got a DC photo
because
somewhere.
the sidewalks are not typically that wide in Capitol Hill. So I'm just.
I'll have
I've
our
been in
folks
DC for
confirm.
35 years, and I showed the Ted. So Ted, this looks like Boston. But
yeah, I'll have our editor double check, but I understand.
If it is, I would recommend putting at the bottom, like what part of the city it is.
Well, we had a picture of the Capitol that, you know, we kind of suggested that they changed just so that we get more of a local touch and a local feeling, but, you know.
I know, but you could say West End, Georgetown, something like that, if it is.
We'll try and track down the location.
You're right. I mean, I've been in town pretty long time. I don't really recognize that right off the bat.
Looks like it could be around Lafayette Park.
Oh, yeah.
It looks like Lafayette Park.
All right, I think I have one more slide as I'm done.
You know what? You're exactly right. Yeah, it's Lafayette Park.
All right, good.
There you go. The White House.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah,
exactly
skip
right.
I was looking at the lighting
That's
that's here. It
Lafayette
looks
Park.
familiar.
Okay.
Vicky, I'm not sure if you want to discuss a process
We
for
resolved
sending
it.
us any additional comments that you may have on the
Well, I
report.
want to be cognizant that it's noon already. I know people have to leave, including you. You haven't done your part. We haven't discussed the new people or going forward on the report. So there's quite a bit to do. I guess I would just say, given that I think we gave a lot of comment now, if you got it, then if anybody has any more, go ahead and send it. Or does anybody have anything further to say? I might have to reading it, but I think we got our big points across. Anybody? And thank you. I mean, 'cause we know you did this in really short order, so thank you. And I do agree with John. It is really helpful, at least for more of a lay person like a lawyer, you know, just up front to see, hit the minimum, hit the maximum. Explain, how'd we do?
I can, yeah, in some reports we have put like a one-page,
I think that's great.
like
Yeah.
executive summary. We can
Great,
certainly
great.
consider that.
Yeah, I think it's great. Do we have a high point you want to hit, or should we?
How much time do you want? Because I know we're beyond the hour right now.
Yeah, I mean, 2 minutes. Can people do 2 more minutes? Okay, because I'm going to add on 2 minutes more on the report. So go ahead.
Well, we can do that sometime.
We have, if you want to give me just 2 minutes, and I want my staff here to make a lot of this presentation, but I'll give you the highlights in 2
Just tell me what slide you want to go to.
That one right there. And then we would dive into the rest of this. I think we needed in 3 weeks, so we can take a more detailed snapshot of this. I can just give you the basic highlights from here in 2 minutes. I know this is a quarterly report, but we have, in the quarter ended in June, we've actually given you numbers here that would take you through the end of July. And the bottom line, represented by the graph at the top, I'll just speak to it, shows you that we've already exceeded the maximum in terms of our savings for electricity for our annual benchmark. We exceeded that by about the end of June. So we've already exceeded the maximum there. And for the gas benchmark, we've exceeded the minimum, but we're working towards the maximum. We have a number of projects that are in the pipeline right now. We have 40 days left in the fiscal year, projects that we hope to close between now and the end of September. The other major point that I would talk about on the next slide is, as we've reported to the board over the last 6 or so, 7 months, our spending on the low-income side is behind because of the launch of the new program for our income qualified program, and as well, you can see highlighted in the yellow down there, which is the CBE spend, where a lot of those contractors are directly working in the low-income space, installing energy efficiency measures in multifamily housing and other income-qualified facilities. So those numbers, as I reported over the year, would be laggards as we get towards the end of the year, and you'll see those numbers get towards the goals that have been set for the organization. Again, but a lot of those programs were put under contract in May and June. You'll see those results come in September. That's 2 months.
Well done.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry about the
Not a problem at all. I want to compliment my staff for the outstanding work that they've done this year in hitting the maximum energy goals well ahead of where we've ever done them in the past. And
that's great. Thank you. So when do we expect the report to be final, or when is the start date for a 3-month deadline for submitting an annual report?
Well, we 90 days after all of the comments that we received today, once the report is finalized, we'll officially transmit it to the board, and that will start the clock. So we have been aiming for mid to late August, and now we're in the later side of August. So we will still aim for the end of the month to get everything done. But we will be in contact with the board to officially.
And I'm just asking because based on last year's experience, which was really painful, at some point it's a moot point because it's going to hit the holidays anyway, and everybody starts disappearing mid-November for Thanksgiving, and then then it's Christmas, and etc. So I don't know if we want to set something a little earlier for ourselves anyway, so that we don't ruin holidays like we did. Last year there was some I'm Jewish, but my holiday. Celebrate it. But I don't think we should try and. I think we should try and avoid that. I'd also think, and I'm recommend discussion each year. I think our reports are getting longer and longer and longer, and I'm not sure that that's necessarily helpful. I think a really nice, concise draft report as an appendix would be a place to start, and we append something to it that's more in the nature of some high-level commentary. Maybe each person who has an interest in a particular issue would say, with regard to electricity savings, here's good job, or could have done better here, and with regard to gas savings or something, just some other way of expediting it, making it less dense and less painful. Would that make sense for us each to take a topic that we care about? Or any other thoughts?
Shorter is better.
Shorter is better. Anybody? I mean, does anybody feel like there's anything? Last year our report was, we spent a lot of time on board input into the contract. We don't have any analysis of that. We did a lot of, I think repetition of what was in the MNB report that I don't know that we necessarily do, as opposed to just appending it and then commenting on it. Right. So does that make sense for people to do? So maybe I will take a crack at sending out an assignment list. Maybe I'll come to you all each individual and see if you want to take a topic or not, then you can circulate it. That'd be great, and then maybe I'll send around the schedule. I am not going to be physically here for the next meeting. Oh, damn, we didn't. Can we elect a vice chair so that we can have somebody who can, I don't know, like next time, anybody want to make a motion for a vice chair? Yeah. Very done. Chairman Kane, are you still on the phone?
Yes, I am.
Are you able to preside in the chair's absence? The advisory board chair's absence next month?
September 11th, is that the date?
It is, yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, I am planning to be there. Yes, I'd be willing to chair.
Okay, thank you. And then we can worry about a vice chair at another date.
Yes.
I might be able to participate by phone, but I'm going to be on business travel out of state. So, anybody have anything else?
So new members?
Oh, well, we have a new member here physically, and why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and welcome.
Okay, thank you so much, and I'm so honored to be part of the advisory board. My name is Damon Strachan. I own a engineering and construction company here in the city. Do a lot of projects here in the city, Maryland, and we've done solar projects, construction projects. We also do other work in the city, so I'm glad to be supporting the representative. Many of you already know, so it's good to see you.
Great. Well, we're thrilled that you're here. Thank you. And I think there's a couple others that are joining but weren't able to make it today.
Well, yes, we know of one, Richard Graves, who was appointed as Council Chair Mendelssohn's representative. And I think we're just waiting to get the confirmations of the others that are currently going through the Mayor's Office of Talent and Appointments.
And how many more are there that are in the wings then?
Well, Lenny resigned, so there's the Economic Development and Green Jobs slot, as well as the two, even though a couple have expired last month, those persons continue to serve until they're either reappointed or there's a replacement. So Jared Lang, the low-income slot, he that expired last month, as well as the renewable slot expired last month, but they could either be reappointed or replaced.
Okay.
And then
swearing in, I think, is on the 17th of
September. Right, so we'll, once we get the appointment letters, we'll be able to officially.
Okay. Thanks all very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.